It's not about, again, this very simplistic old-fashioned view of stretching that you just got to stretch the living daylights out of an area and you'll get relief. This is about intelligent movement, bringing change back into your entire neuromuscular system. Hello and welcome back. Now, just before we get started, if you're watching this on the Total Somatics YouTube channel, don't forget to like, share, subscribe and press the notification bell so whenever an episode is released, you find out very quickly. Now, just to let you know, before we start this episode, I've been listening to a lot of your comments and your feedback, and many of you are asking if I can make some little mini episodes. So what I'm going to do is scatter them at different times, so do have a look out for them. And if you're subscribed to the Somatic Movement and Mindset podcast channel, wherever you get your podcasts, or you're subscribed to the Total Somatics YouTube channel, you will find these little mini episodes. So these little mini episodes, I've termed them as soma seeds. So I'm just scattering them out periodically, and they're just small little sections for you just to enjoy in between the usual episodes. And there'll be some very special little soma seeds coming up very soon. I'm sharing some lovely comments with people from around the world that are in the Total Somatics membership, so do have a look out for them. But today, let's have a look at our episode and what we're going to approach today. Now, I thought to myself, what I would love to do is share this episode in how I came to clinical somatic movement and how I first approached this amazing area and then how things developed. So first of all, it actually came about because I'd been and seen a personal trainer, and because of an exercise that had happened, it created an injury. So I ended up in my left shoulder with shoulder bursitis. I was in absolute agony, and I was still trying to work clinically. So I was doing my own approaches of what I would do. However, I also went to see different practitioners, and I would follow their advice religiously. I did everything that they were saying. But the problem is that the same things kept coming up and the results weren't there. So many of the things were to rest it, was to stretch it, was to strengthen that whole area of my shoulders, put ice in it, put ice on the area, and also use anti-inflammatories. And although some of those things helped, the problem was still there. It was like a band-aid. It was just masking the issue. So everywhere I went, everyone that I spoke to, they all said stretch. And no matter how much I tried to stretch, and of course my background before I came into clinical somatics was I was a stretch therapist as well. I would use that in conjunction with many other of my clinical modalities that I would use. And so I would stretch, I would take their advice to stretch, but again, it was temporary relief. It never really lasted. And at times when I stretched, I'd actually feel worse afterwards. Now, the reason for this is that when you're stretching, all that you're doing is just lengthening and pulling on a muscle from the outside to the inside. It doesn't change anything with your nervous system and the way that your nervous system is communicating or signaling to those muscles. And in this situation, your nervous system is telling your muscles to stay contracted. So no amount of pulling, passively just pulling on a muscle, is going to change the communication or the messaging between your brain and the belly of your muscle. And you see, if we consider a little bit more about what bursitis is, there's often a compression within the joint, and that's due to muscular tension and rigidity that's happened. So no amount of stretching a tight muscle is going to actually reduce the underlying patterns of tension that have been created. In actual fact, if you've got a really tight muscle and you've got a compressed joint, the amount of pulling that you do will actually make the muscle try and tense up and resist that pulling. And as a result, something called the stretch reflex is triggered, which is a really special, amazing safety mechanism. So if you try pulling or stretching a muscle beyond where your brain has calibrated that range of movement to be, what will happen is there's a spinal cord reflex action. And what that does is it instantly will contract and tighten the muscle to protect it from stretching or tearing. So you've already got a tense muscle, you've got compressed joint, which is what's irritating and inflaming the bursa, and then you go to pull an existingly tight muscle. So you're just yanking it or pulling it from both ends. And the stretch reflex is going to be activated, and that's going to tighten everything. That's why you often can feel a bit achy the next day. Things can not feel just great because you've over efforted and you've stretched. And so what's happening in this situation, if we look at the theory of stretching, you're actually pulling against that natural process. So we want to start moving forward and keeping up with neuroscience and neuromuscular science and thinking, actually, there's a lot of research now to show that that is actually an outdated approach from quite a few decades ago, and we want to keep moving with the times. And that's why I moved with the times, because thankfully, from a professional cyclist that came to see me, that was based in Europe most of the time, but came and saw me when he was in Australia, he told me all those years ago that his back surgeon told him to not stretch and to practice pandiculation, which I had no idea what that was. But that's the process that is in clinical somatic movement. And that's now what I qualified in and I teach people globally. So within clinical somatic movement, this is when those eureka moments came, because I discovered something incredibly powerful. And that was that I stood back globally and I considered the entire approach of what was happening with me on a biomechanical level, on a neuromuscular level, looked at my habits, my rituals, my daily activities. And I realized that my shoulder wasn't actually the problem. It was part of a full body pattern of muscular contraction and tension. What happened is all this tension had built up around my ribs, around my hips, around my shoulders, my torso really. And this is what I encourage people to do. You know, I'm in one of my clinic rooms here in my wellbeing centre in Adelaide in South Australia. But I'll often encourage people when they come in to see me clinically, and I do the same with people that I work with online and within the Total Somatics online membership, is I encourage them that have a look in the mirror. Stand in the mirror and notice your entire musculature. Notice your posture. Do you notice if maybe one armpit is dropping down towards one hip on one side more than the other? Maybe you can see that there's a twist or a rotation in your pelvis. Can you see if one shoulder's higher than the other? And how is your head position compensating for this situation? Only recently, somebody came in to see me and they'd been seeing a practitioner that had been needling and doing lots of attention and focus on their shoulder, like it was on their right shoulder and neck. And yet there was a bit of temporary relief, but it kept coming back. And the reason for that is when I got them into my clinic room and I said, look in the mirror, what do you notice? And I encourage them to notice the tension all the way through the right side of their body. So as their right armpit was drawing down to their right hip, their shoulders changed position and even her head changed position there. And that's what was happening. The issues going on further down through her torso and her hips, that was what was impacting the problem in her neck and shoulders. So she'd been having somebody targeting where the pain was. But that's why I encourage you, stand back globally, look at the entire picture and notice what's the rest of your posture doing. Because that's when that light bulb eureka moment comes, when you realize it's to do with neuromuscular patterning of tension. It's not about, again, this very simplistic old-fashioned view of stretching that you just got to stretch the living daylights out of an area and you'll get relief. This is about intelligent movement, bringing change back into your entire neuromuscular system. But we can only do that when we become aware of what's happening. And that's such a powerful thing. And that really was the moment when I thought, now I can see why that doctor has advised that professional cyclist not to stretch anymore, but to practice pandiculation. Because his patterns of tension, as you can imagine, from back pain, would have been from rolling forward on a bike a lot of the time. There would have been a lot of tension through the front of his body. So just stretching a hamstring or doing a hip stretch, you know, which is the common things that he was told before he started doing pandiculation, is again, can you see it's a very basic, simplistic, old-fashioned view. If we're looking at functional awareness of how we're moving, neuromuscular patterning from what's going on in your brain and translating that into your body, that's when we start to make intelligent change. And so that's what's happening is when we bring this awareness into us, then we see that these neuromuscular patterns can be changed, because until now, for many years and decades for some people, this has been your normal. It was my normal. It's that gradual, like, we all talk about the frog in boiling water and how you slowly turn that dial up. You don't notice until it's too late for the poor little frog. It's the same with us. We don't notice these habits and these rituals until the pain comes or till it restricts us from doing things. And that's because it's so insidious, it becomes very subconscious or not under our conscious awareness that we think that's our normal. And what was happening is, from this full body pattern of muscular contraction and tightness, this behavior was pulling my shoulder out of alignment. It was creating poor alignment, compressing on the shoulder joint, irritating the bursa. So when there was movement of different angles, it was flaring up, and it was starting to create more stress and inflammation within my bursa. And so one of the main players, or one of the main reasons that contribute towards bursitis, is rib rigidity. I talk about it all the time within the Total Somatics membership. So if you are in the membership, I'm sure you're nodding your head in agreement to this. But again, you start looking around, not just at yourself, but look around at people and start noticing they've often got a bit of a slump to one side. They may have a rounded shoulders, and so it means their ribs at the front are contracted. Or it could be that their bottom sticks out, their shoulders set back, their belly might stick out a fair bit, or even if they don't have much of a belly, there's still a little belly protruding, and there's a lot of tightness going on through the back of the rib cage. So it means that at some point you are being held tight in one or many of those positions through your ribs. And so when your rib cage becomes stiff and rigid, it creates things such as shallow breathing, and that also we can get issues from like sitting for hours at a desk. That can cause a lot of issues or can contribute towards rib rigidity. Also stress. Also, if we do a lot of exercise, if we do a lot of weight training, a lot of Pilates, any of these sorts of repetitive actions, again, cycling, where we're, again, doing things on a repetitive motion and we're hunkering down and pulling and drawing that tension in and around the rib cage, that is going to start to restrict your shoulder mobility. And as a result of that, if we leave that too long, it creates a lot of chronic shoulder issues, and it could lead on to bursitis. So the shoulder, or your shoulder, if we consider our beautiful shoulders individually, it cannot move freely without the movement and the bounce and ease of your rib cage. So remember, if your rib cage is locked down, your shoulders will be very limited with their movement too. And there's a lot of compensatory patterns that happen, but what's really happening with these compensatory patterns is, if your rib cage is rigid, if your shoulders become tight, they're just not moving so freely, you do start to compensate and create other movement patterns. But in a sense, it can tire out and really fatigue those muscles, because they're going beyond their job description, or they're taking on more than what they should be. Because with a nice, healthy, functioning movement with efficient muscle memory, when one side contracts, the other side of your body lengthens and releases with efficient movement. When that principle comes in, you have more strength in your muscles. You have less fatigue, because you have this really happy unit, this functional movement happening. Again, shock absorbency, healthy joints, big, deep breathing, the ribs will move freely in this situation. So that's why we want to look at what we can do to prevent this overuse of tension and rigidity and pain that happens when we allow these ribs to become tight over the time. So that's why in Total Somatics, and that's what I do within Total Somatics, is I use Clinical Somatic Movement and Pandiculation. What I'm doing is helping you bring back efficient muscle memory, so that, again, as I've mentioned, the principle of natural movement is, as you move, when one side of your body contracts, the other side lengthens and releases to make that happen. That creates fluid, efficient movement. But many people are walking around rigid. If you do a lot of weights, if you go and do a lot of gym work, I love the gym, but I'll often be scanning and noticing the rigidity in people's bodies, because they'll be doing their weights and then they'll just do a few stretches. But again, as we know, it's a very simplistic, very basic, old-fashioned approach. You're literally just pulling on a muscle, and it absolutely does nothing long term to reintroducing movement back into your body. We want to use your neuromuscular system. We want to work intelligently. And that's what I want to teach you within the Total Somatics membership. I'd love you to join me and all the beautiful members around the world, because that's where you will make a lasting change. You will ease all those joint pains, those issues that you have, because when you work gently, but it's a powerful technique, you will be softening and releasing tension from the belly of your muscle, which is the powerhouse. That's where the strength comes from. When you release that through pandiculation, that's when you will find that you will make huge changes with whatever you want to do. If it's improving your cardio, your weights, just being able to move freely, reducing your pain, improving your mobility, maybe to improve your posture. You're starting to see that you're rounding your shoulders or you're slumped to one side. All of those aspects can be addressed when we bring back this natural neuromuscular reset, pandiculation. So if you want to know a bit more about pandiculation, I actually have a TEDx talk which you can check out. So if you go to YouTube and you put in the search bar TEDx Heidi Hadley, will pop my pandiculation talk, and in that I talk in greater detail about pandiculation. I share with you some research and statistics, and also my own personal experience with it too. So that's TEDx Heidi Hadley if you go to the search bar within YouTube. But I would also invite you to come and join me within the Total Somatics membership. So if you go to totalsomatics.com, click on the Join Now page, and you have the opportunity to join me and all the wonderful people around the world that are in the Total Somatics membership. Now, every now and again, I will open the doors to the Total Somatics membership. So if you go in and you look on that page and you actually notice that the doors are closed to the membership, you have the ability to leave your details in a little box there. And then the next time I open the membership doors, you will be informed straight away, because I only open it for a few days and then we close them so we can be fully focused on what we want to do within Total Somatics. So I hope to see you there soon, and look out in my next episode, because in my next episode I'm going to just develop on a little bit more from today's episode and share with you that difference in greater detail, and share a few main points of why pandiculation is far superior to stretching. So do check that out in the next episode. But all my love and my very best wishes to you. Take care. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you for joining me today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and also forward this on to somebody you know will benefit. To learn more about pain relief, plus how to improve your health and well-being, go to totalsomatics.com. Until next time, take care.